Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Jen Looper. She's the author of Computer Science for Kids, a storytelling approach, a book from Wiley. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on your show again.
Yeah, you were on like 700 episodes ago or 600 episodes ago. I'm coming up on episode 1000. So it's been a long time, certainly well before you wrote this book.
Definitely. A lot of water under the bridge for sure.
But you have been an educator like as long as I've known you. Like your passion and mine collide very much because it's like we're here to teach. And even if you're working for Microsoft or AWS or whatever, you do it through the lens of education. Have you always been wired like that?
I think so. I was just thinking back on this and I just realized I come from this long line of educators. My grandmother was the first woman to get a master's from Oklahoma State University back in the day. She was born in like 1899. She was born in Texas before it was the state, covered wagon, the whole shebang. And then my mother was a first grade teacher in the Santa Monica public schools. So, and I just realized that a lot of the things she did with us kids was completely linked to the way she taught those first graders. It's just like I start to realize now there's this long line of connections.
So being educated and educating and doing it in a fun way is something that's infused in your whole lineage.
I think so. Yeah, it's a long line. And I think my daughter's going to be a teacher too, which is really cool.
I know that you've done lectures and talks, and we can find videos of you online. You've even developed curricula and have a very fantastic beginner web developer course on GitHub that's been around for years. It's seminal indeed. But have you ever taught formally?
Let's see. So I have taught preschoolers when I was in college. So I was working in the campus daycare. I was a student teacher there. So my specialty were the 3-year-olds at that time. They're the best. And then I just got certified to teach as a substitute in K-12. So been doing a lot of first grade kind of subbing. But in terms of formal teaching, I have taught at Boston University's Metropolitan College.
Hmm.
That is teaching front end software technology. I think I'm going to teach a course on project management pretty soon. And then I'm an adjunct as I was switching from being in the academy to becoming a full-time technologist. I was adjuncting. So I taught in the English department at Wellesley College in Regis. I taught in the writing program at Wellesley College. And then a bit of adjuncting in French in Regis. I had to think back because it's so long ago, but yeah, a lot of teaching here and there. I thought many, many times of getting my certificate and just doing the thing, getting my teaching certificate and just teaching. And something is always blocking me. And I think that door may be finally closed for me. So it's been an interesting few months of kind of self-analysis. What do I want to do, you know?
But it's all teaching though at its heart though, right?
Yeah, it's all teaching. Yeah. And curriculum development is way fun, as we like to say, as the kids would say. It's wicked cool, as we say in Boston.
You know, I know that teaching is such an honorable discipline, and people always talk about how teachers are so selfless. But this is controversial, but it's an incredibly selfish thing to be a teacher because it's so rewarding that
Uh-huh.
I can't not do it. Because that feeling of like I just lit someone's brain on fire, and they're so excited. The feeling that I get from teaching someone is so. I think about I am so selfish to want to have that feeling all the time.
It's
You
a
know what
great
I'm saying?
privilege. It's a great privilege to be able to be put in front of a classroom and put in front of a workshop, any workshop, and to just teach people who are willing to listen to you. I always feel like, wow, that's a dopamine hit right there. They're
It
actually
is.
listening and looking at me, right?
That is it. You nailed it. It is a dopamine hit. So with computer science for kids, you are effectively putting out a curriculum here. It could be used at any age, but you have a target age here that you're going for.
Yeah, so this is aligned to grades 6 through 8 in the US. So those like 11 to 13-year-old kids in middle school. And middle school is one of those challenging ages, right? We all know this. And
Hmm.
but statistically, and I did a little research on this, this is the place where girls in particular tend to drop out of computer science topics. And I wanted to create a curriculum that would be the ultimate welcoming curriculum. And the hook in this whole thing is that you should be able to visualize yourself as a builder. Don't think of software engineering as people who are in the basement with, typing away through the wee hours of the night or doing heavy mathematical, algorithmic challenge coding. Think of yourself as just building interesting solutions and think about, how that can kind of be applied to many, many different disciplines. So there's a hidden curriculum in this book around sustainability. The idea is you're walking through a mystical forest with a guide. We're never quite sure what that guide is all about, who she is, what's going on there, but they walk you through this forest and present you with problems that need solving. There's someone is stealing this rare species of moss. We don't know who's doing it, but maybe you need to think about securing a gate, securing some kind of access, so then we can talk about topics around security. It's aligned to Computer Science Teachers Association standards for grades 6 through 8. And if you look at CS Teachers, I think it's .org, check me on that. You can look at the standards, and it's really interesting. It's pretty hardcore. I mean, I had to write about compliance for grades 6 through 8. Who knew? But they really want people to dig in early. By the time you're in high school, you're supposed to be training from scratch machine learning models. It's very interesting. And it's going to be evolving. This year and next year, they're thinking of maybe making some edits to the standards to make it a little more AI focused. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think the book stands out in that it has that standards mapping. I mean, there's lots of like delightful, whimsical, random person writes a book on computer science for kids. We have to be honest. But right here, I'm looking at the standards mapping, and it's like, okay, this chapter covers that standard, and you have the identifiers listed out in exquisite detail. Like you had to go and go back and forth between identifier and standard to make sure that everything in the book hit a specific standard. And frankly, I thought it was pretty advanced for 6th to 8th graders. I'm like, really? They need to know about that?
I know. I was like, compliance, really? Just slam it to prod and call it a day. No, just kidding. But what I wanted to do is start out with sort of some low code solutions, and then we have the wonderful Microsoft Make Code and some microbit projects that people can work on, whether they have the actual device or they can do it online. And then it progressively gets a little bit more into typing. And by the end of it, you're using A-frame and making some virtual worlds. There's a really fun chapter where you're writing a Twine storyline. Right when I was writing this chapter, Twine completely redesigned their website, so I had to go do all the screenshots over again. So you know how that goes. But super fun, super fun.
Let's talk about Make Code a little bit, because I work with the Make Code team. I've always loved Make Code. I've got literally on my desk here, I'm holding up a Make Code arcade device that you can get from Adafruit. It's, we all love Scratch, but I feel like Make Code really takes it to the next level. And I'm curious why you picked Make Code and Microbit as your opening.
Yes, a lot of love for Make Code and Microbit. I love the way Make Code has an entire community and an entire ecosystem built into it. Same thing with Microbit. Microbit has also the foundation behind it. So it's a product I can absolutely get behind. And I feel it's a block-based language, just like Scratch, but I felt like once you engage with Make Code, you can see all the cool projects that you can also make. So it's like you can take the book and just do the thing, or you can jump into that community and make more and more and more things. So I just thought Make Code was a really great solution to try. And then it led right into the microbit aspect as well.
Mm-hmm. So the microbit is what? It's a physical device that gives you some sensors, and sensors are super important for the project here where we discover these fireflies.
Yeah. And I love that it has a strong emulator with it, so that if you don't have the device, which a lot of people want, then you can just go ahead and try it in the emulator. So
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the device I think is like $15. You can find them anywhere. It looks like a little circuit board, but you can also just plug the device into a breadboard. So someone can get started with these projects for nothing, for $20. But if they don't have them, the emulator puts it on the screen and it really looks like and acts like the real device.
Yeah, very important aspect for sure.
Yeah. So everything in the entire book can be done with just a computer and a browser. You don't need to have any physical devices.
Exactly. That was really important to me, because I know some of these devices, even if they're not that expensive, there's still that barrier. And the one thing that I've tried to do through my entire career is to make people understand that, there is ability everywhere, but access is quite limited for a lot of regions. So let's see what we can do to at least fix that in any small way. One thing about this curriculum is that there's a teacher's website that goes with it. And if a teacher will just email me that they're interested in getting access, I'll give them the password. I didn't want to make everything open because it's like the answers to all the quizzes and everything else. So you know what will happen. But I just want teachers to always know they have access. And there's also an LMS integration for Canvas. It's done with Common Cartridge. So with Common Cartridge, you can design the coursework on your LMS, and then you can pull it into your any LMS that supports that. LMS being Learning Management Systems. I'm digging into acronyms. Sorry about that.
No, that was my follow-up question was going to be, what is an LMS? And now I know. Now, what about for home learners? I know that there are a lot of parents that would love to teach something like this at home. Can they do that as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've had some of the better reactions from homeschoolers who are looking to, just have some kind of curriculum that's aligned to something that they can walk through progressively. So yeah, lots of folks can just pick up the book, grab the website, I'll give you the password, jump in.
Mhm. When you were building something like this, how do you test it? Like, do you find random kids? Do you start with the local school district? How do you know a book like this works when you're effectively making curriculum?
Yeah, that is the hard part. And that you got to just bite the bullet and go talk to your local school. So I went to our local school. I live in Wellesley and in Massachusetts. So we have amazing public schools. And I went and talked to the computer science teacher, got some of her pain points. And one of their pain points was, we're struggling to find a curriculum. What happens a lot in public schools is they ask the math department to staff their computer science courses, which is great. Math teachers are awesome. But it's a little bit different kind of muscle that needs to be exercised to create great computer science classes. So they're looking for curriculum. So I presented the idea to a couple different teachers there, and then they got me in front of a focus group of middle school kids, and that was terrifying. All these sixth graders looking at me like, "Oh golly, here comes Auntie. She's going to create something weird." And I just showed them. I wanted to get an idea about the art, whether they thought it was cool-ish, whether it was interesting. And I think I got the stamp of approval from those kids, which was nice. I think the biggest issue with this book is that it is a book. It's a textbook.
Mm.
And I think the industry is kind of moving away from textbooks a little bit. So the next step for this whole thing, and this is what the kids told me. The kids told me, get these bits and pieces on video and make quests. So have something on your website that will allow people to have extra projects and quests. So I started that a little bit. If you go to the accompanying website, it's cs4kids.club. So there's some quests that students can do to kind of build a little bit more. It needs more work, but there's a lot of options there.
Yeah, I mean, everything here can be built up into a quest, and they could be done online. You could add video. I mean, the bones are all there, but it's still a fantastic book. The one I've got is in full color with screenshots and code. And to your point, it gets more and more and more complicated. Like I think it's useful even for a refresher. If someone is listening to the podcast, maybe they did tech 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and they want to get ramped up because by the end you have a whole system.
Yeah. And you've saved the forest. So woo.
Absolutely. One of the other things that I thought was really cool, and you start this early on in the book, is you have sections called Think Like a Computer Scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's so important because it really is about problem solving. Right now, when we interview people, we seem to make it about trivia. Do you remember this function? Do you know how this library works? I'm not interested in that. I want to know whether or not the person's wired to think like a problem solver.
Yeah.
And you start that very early on in the book about, there's no power. Let's think like a computer scientist.
Yeah. What are you going to do? It's that computational thinking, that problem solving muscle that needs to be developed. And it all comes down to creative thinking again, which we keep talking about in the industry. But I think a lot of us who are coming up as builders who've been doing this for a long time, we're extremely creative people. And I think people don't even realize how much creativity is needed in the computer science realm.
Well, there's creative thinking, and then there's also systems thinking, which has been a theme on this podcast. How does this thing fit within the larger system? Whether it be your example with the ecosystem, the actual nature, which is a system in itself, or the computer system that the kids build over the course of the time that they spend with the book.
Yeah, exactly. When you're saving the moss, you want to create a barrier. What kind of barrier? Is it a gate? it better be, because light needs to come through so that the moss can survive. These kind of things. You have to think kind of holistically.
I think thinking holistically, in my opinion, as I have two young sons, is becoming a challenge because with the introduction of things like AI, kids are less interested in the little details. Like I always found the little Radio Shack things where it's like get a battery and turn on a light to be endlessly fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, in the advent of the iPad and the iPad age, kids are less interested in turning lights on with batteries. And now that they can just ask an AI to do anything, how do we
Wow.
keep them interested in this kind of stuff?
That's really, you reminded me of something that our first grade teacher used to do, which in retrospect, I'm not sure it's a great idea, but she would basically give the kids screwdrivers and go to our local dump. We don't have trash pickup in this town. We have to go to the dump. So, but there's a reusable section with all this electronics. You can just give the kids a screwdriver and have them dismantle things. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Do they not do that anymore? That was so fun.
oh, because I didn't grow up doing that, but I'm so happy that my kids were able to.
Oh my goodness. You didn't do that? That
Not
was,
really.
I think it's because there's less stuff that you can take apart. Like, what are you going to take apart? An iPad or a toaster? Like, there's nothing in between.
Mm.
But during my time, there was like clock, radio, telephone combo,
Mm.
things with capacitors. We were
Yeah.
always busting things open. Everything but a TV. Anything that
Yeah.
wasn't high voltage.
Yes, or some kind of chemicals. I would worry about some kind of chemicals leaking out Freon. I don't even know. But, I think that we're missing shop class. You remember shop class?
Mm.
You know, that and home ec
Home
even.
ec and shop.
Home
Those
ec and
are
shop.
gone.
Yeah, 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 and that's too bad. When I went to Wellesley College, which is a women's college, and one thing we were always requesting was cooking classes because we all knew we'd have to cook, but it was considered oppressive, So we were like, well, we want to learn how to cook, but we don't really want to turn into housewives. So it's a whole political thing about home ec, but here we are.
Just speaking of the gendered aspect of things, yesterday we spent the weekend with my 17-year-old, and he had a bunch of his bros, because they're all bros,
Eh?
over to the house, all the football team, like 5 guys in my house. And you know what they were doing? They made a pair of jeans. They bought denim. They
Wow.
got muslin. They took apart one of the guy's jeans, and then they
They made
built
a
a pattern out of it with the muslin, and then got some denim. I'll text you the pictures.
That's
They got
incredible.
some denim needles apparently, because they were sitting there on a bunch of bros on TikTok. Like, how do you do buttons on a jeans? And they're watching the video, and then they do it.
Oh my
And
god.
they spent, God, freaking like 17 hours on these jeans.
Wow, I'd love to see the result. I bet they're amazing.
Yeah, I mean they're pants. I mean they're jeans. I don't know if they're like fantastic, bespoke, perfect, but like I just thought it was so cool that a problem presented itself,
Wow.
and it was like I just imagine the conversation was probably something like, "Bro, those jeans are sick. Yeah, let's make them. Okay, how do we do that? I don't know. Google it." And then they Googled their way, and this project's been going on for like 2 days. It's absolutely fascinating to watch, and
That's great. I love
from their
that.
perspective, they're building,
Yeah,
and building is the goal, right?
I love that, and as a team, boy, there's a whole lot of lessons to be discerned from that activity. That's wonderful. You reminded me of a magazine that used to be out by Consumer Reports called Penny Power Magazine in the '80s, and it was all about how to kind of hack the system. So we were all
Mm-hmm.
making we were too cheap to pay for designer jeans, which were the thing in the '80s. So instead, we learned how to embroider our own logos on the pocket, so it looked like our own designer jeans.
That's funny. I actually asked the boys what their like patch was going to be, like what their leather. Like, I thought the part that would be interesting would be designing the company or designing the logo and then putting the patch on. They weren't interested in any of that.
Oh, okay.
They were more interested in the quality of the Japanese denim that they got online or whatever. It
Holy
was
cow!
absolutely
Incredible.
fascinating.
That's
These are like
wonderful.
$100 pair of pants at this point, but
That's fantastic.
they made it themselves. It was fascinating to watch.
Excellent.
Hey, friends, this is Scott. We're going to take a moment to thank a new sponsor, ShareGate by WorkLeap. I've been thinking about moving my Google Suite organization over to M365, and after that migration, Shaylin Gimby, what are the biggest challenges in driving adoption of new tools?
Honestly, the biggest challenge is user education. People don't like change. And if they don't fully understand the new tools, they won't use them. That leads to low adoption rates, which means missed opportunities for better collaboration and efficiency. The problem is IT teams don't really have time to build and distribute and monitor training programs. So we built it for them. ShareGate offers 15 plus hours of end user training courses designed to help organizations increase Microsoft 365 adoption without adding more work for the IT teams. When users actually understand the tools at their disposal, they're more likely to use them effectively. And that's when you start seeing real productivity gains.
That is very cool. And that is one tool to migrate faster and secure your tenant. Check them out at sharegate.com. It's your out-of-the-box Microsoft 365 migration solution. It's packed with best practices and training information that's going to guide you at every step. Thanks for being a sponsor. So things like this, whether it be My Kids Making Jeans or Computer Science for Kids, it's meant to have kids generating, not consuming.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, that's what you're trying to do here, right?
Yeah. And this is we're in an interesting moment in education. And I've worked in ed tech for ages. I'm starting up my own studio. It's going to be an ed tech studio. But boy, we are really asking little kids to be consuming an awful lot of digital content, which is another interesting word. And I sat as a substitute teacher and watched those first graders being obliged to do hours of iPad work. And it hurt my heart. And the little boy, I'll never forget this moment. This little boy looked up at me and he said, "iPads are bad for your eyes." And so we had a conversation. I'm like, well, okay, here's what you can do. Just look outside, look out the window every 10 minutes. This whole strategy. Jeez Louise. Yeah, I don't love that. I don't love that.
Yeah, my kids and I actually call those eye push-ups, where you look into the far distance and then look close, and then look into the far distance and look close. So when their eyes hurt, I say, do eye push-ups.
Oh, good idea. Good idea.
I don't know if that's a thing or not, but it seems like a reasonable thing to do. But you're absolutely right. I mean, balancing consumption with creativity is challenging. Like, I have no doubt that the boys would have rather spent the weekend watching Netflix. And there was like a TV going in the background watching March Madness. They were watching basketball. But the amount of attention that was spent on this was many hours over many days. One day they went till 2 a.m. and made it into a sleepover. And I found the whole thing to be fascinating because in a time when people can't concentrate for more than a minute on a TikTok, when something captures someone's attention, you should go with that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think that their attraction to something that's tactile and that's going to be beautiful, potentially the aesthetic aspect of what they're doing, I think is one of the hooks that we're forgetting a lot of times. There's something really important about things you can hold and feel and touch and experience from a sensual level.
Yeah. And that's why I don't like, I've said this before publicly, but I don't like AI art because it cheapens the creation of art. It makes it too easy. You can take someone's work and just algorithmic it. And I think I'm hoping in the next couple of years, we'll see a return to the bespoke, whether it be bespoke clothing as opposed to cheap $2 like clothing hauls and things like that.
Yeah.
And, I noticed that you didn't use any AI in your thing. Everything is bespoke, probably because AI was emerging at the time.
Yes.
Would you teach things differently, or how would you incorporate AI? And if so, would it make it a better book or would it make the book worse?
Boy, that's a great question. And that is the question that educators are tackling now. Where does AI fit into our craft as educators? I stopped teaching CS 601, which is my front-end development class at Boston University Met, paused it for a while I figure this out, and I haven't taken it back up because I don't know. I don't know what we can do to properly incorporate code completion tools like Copilot and everything else, Bolt and all the great tooling out there, while still teaching fundamentals. And I mean, obviously we do need to teach fundamentals, but it's just so easy to bang open Bolt and make it scaffold your website, or Clive, which is completely agentic, just creating an entire drafts of your website for you. I think it's going to go back to the concept of being bespoke. And, let's open up VS Code, turn off Copilot for the moment. Let's just create some HTML, see what it does with no CSS, no JavaScript, nothing. What does it look like? Okay, now we're going to try to fix X. Let's do it by hand. And another aspect that I've thought about for a computer science classroom would be to do kind of code reviews, to take the opposite approach, have Clive scaffold you the entire website, and then do a code review to see where there are problems or mistakes. That's for a little bit more advanced students. But I basically, I gave it a very simple prompt one time saying, I would need you to create X, Y, and Z. I didn't tell it what language or anything. And it just banged out a React website. So then I had to rip it all out and put it in Vue because I'm a Vue developer, So I think there are some teachings around that, but that's for a little bit more intermediate student.
That would be really interesting. I was thinking about, I had a gentleman named John Warner on the show a couple of 100 episodes ago, talking about AI within the context of the 5-paragraph essay. And he's an English teacher, and he's not a fan of the 5-paragraph essay. And he wrote a book on it called Why They Can't Write, and why introduction, 3 paragraphs of supporting material, and a final paragraph is a mistake. And I never thought about the fact that you could use AI to teach writing by having it write a perfectly mid essay. And then you get your graduate students to tear it apart and talk about, like, this is why it's mid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You can do that. Yeah. I just wonder if that's such a great use of our time, as humans. Yeah. That's the challenge. It's if you look at the Chronicle of Higher Education, there's a heartfelt article, 2 years into the AI revolution for an educator, what it feels like. And he had a student who had been writing okay essays by hand, clearly by hand. And then all of a sudden produced this beautifully polished, extremely well argued, very nicely done essay. And it's clearly as ChatGPT, right? So he got in front of the kid, face to face, this doesn't sound like you. What's going on here? And just like straight barefaced, oh, it's mine, it's me. And you could hear him typing in ChatGPT to get the right answers in the background. It's like, oh my gosh, we're training our students. I also have another friend who's a teacher, teaches in UMass Boston. And she's under very heavy pressure because she has a very heavy course load and she's not tenured. Bunch of students putting in their essays. She's being pressured to use ChatGPT to grade them. So it's like AI is talking to AI at this point. And I'm like, what in God's name are we doing at this point?
And again, this gets to that generational thing where you said that when you showed up to teach this class, you're like thinking that the kids are thinking, who is this auntie? Here I am, a person of a certain age, thinking the same. When I go and teach, the response is, okay, Zoomer, or okay, Boomer, or okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I think I have some validity here. I think I have some bona fides. I would really encourage you to listen to me. But I'm not sure how to get that message across effectively, because I know we're going to miss something if we don't know how to change our own oil. If we don't, like, I always use the example of an Uber. An Uber is so easy until the car breaks down. And then what do you do? Well, I do appreciate that you did not use AI within this. It would be interesting to think about how it might fit. But honestly, being able to do all of this work bespoke, and then you use the A-frame. Maybe talk a little bit about that A-frame library and why you use that, because things get 3D pretty quickly in the book.
Yeah, they do. Why on earth did I choose A-frame? I have to remind myself.
Well, it's that library that uses HTML to make 3D virtual worlds.
Yes.
So you start with A-frame, which lets you basically wander around this forest. I thought it was interesting that most books like this do things in 2D.
Yeah.
And you kind of unapologetically said, no, let's make it more interesting for the kids. Let's go 3D.
Yeah, I think it's that the little video game hook. You're creating a world. Let's create a really awesome world, as awesome as we can. And now I looked at the book and I reminded myself, Glitch, which is where I did a lot of the projects because it's open, it's really easy to access. Mm-hmm. It has a nice A-frame integration, it's kind of nicely hosted there. So I think that was one of the things that impacted my choice, as well as the aesthetics. So
I know you've been an advocate for the open web since always, and you worked at Glitch for a time, and you worked at Microsoft for a time. In all of these things, the passion for the front end really came out. And I'm curious, do you do most of your work bespoke now, or how do you find yourself creating?
As opposed to AI, yeah.
Or,
Just a slight correction. I never worked at Glitch, but I do use it a lot. I actually use it for Boston University Metropolitan College. So,
oh, my apologies. I
no
thought that you
worries.
were there. No, thanks for your patience.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a newsletter on AI, and I like to try new things and put things through their paces.
Mhm.
I'm enjoying using Copilot, especially when I need to upgrade something that I've done in the past. I find it really helpful. If I had to take something from view 2 and upgrade it to view 3. Boy, that was so helpful, so fast, so clean and nice. I really appreciated that kind of task. I've already built the thing. Now I just have to update it and upgrade it. That's brilliant. I like Copilot's asking, you ask it a question and then it gives you the suggestions. But I've been experimenting with Clive, which is hooked up to whichever model you want, and it's completely an agent. It just does automatically starts messing around in your code base and changing things. It's terrifying. I really don't care for that so much.
You don't like letting go of the steering wheel.
Oh no, I don't. I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable with that at all. I found that it created some pretty sloppy code in a lot of places, a lot of not very dry code.
Mhm.
I was, however, really impressed with Bolt.new, which allows you to scaffold up a website. Now, I've had a little experience with this with Code Sandbox as well, kind of these very helpful online systems. But I thought Bolt did a nice, clean job. And then it has that nice attachment to Stack Overflow, Stack Blitz. And that worked really well. So it's sort of, I'm just putting things through their paces, seeing how far I can get. And I was running out of credits and I'm too cheap to buy anything at all. So it's just like, and that's a challenge I have for someone. Try using these agents and try using heavily using Copilot and then run out of credits and
Yep.
see where your brain takes you. It's like that horrified feeling. Oh no,
There was a young person who had some challenges on social media a couple of weeks ago where they were building a startup in entirely with Vibe coding, and they never learned source control, and unfortunately they lost all of their material.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh no, I'll just generate it again." But ultimately, I like the idea of a co-pilot as a junior engineer who's there to help me out with the boring stuff.
Yeah.
Do the
Definitely.
tedium, do the toil.
Definitely.
But I want the creativity and the fun stuff to be bespoke.
Yes. Firebase integrations. It mangled my code pretty good, but I finally got it whipped into shape. Yeah.
Well, Computer Science for Kids, a storytelling approach, is available from Wiley. You can find it anywhere that you get books. I picked mine up at Amazon. Certainly, you can also get it as an ebook. I like the physical one because it's got whole pages in color. It's very well put together. And you should really be proud of this, Jen Looper. Thanks so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thanks for talking about it. It's I would say it's my masterpiece. I've done a lot of curriculum, done a lot of writing, but this was the one that really made me happy. And I have to say, because we talk a lot about AI art, but the illustrations were done by Mirla, who's a student in Venezuela, and I've asked her to do my illustrations for ages. So she's did brilliant work.
I love that. Support artists, support local artists, find actual humans to do your art.
Yes.
And you did just that with the art in this book. Very cool.
Yeah.
You can check out Jen Looper at jenlooper.com. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.